Last year, Philips announced that they will be entering the monitor market with their completely brand new gaming brand called Evnia. And this right here is the very first Evnia monitor to come out. It is a 34-inch ultra-wide Quad HD VA panel with 165 Hz refresh rate and a mini LED backlight, which means it should offer plenty of brightness to make its display HDR 1400 label possible. They're also taking a bit of a different approach with their marketing this time around, and they are saying that this whole brand focuses on a more diverse user base, specifically pointing out women gamers, which apparently means that they made it white, they added some RGB in the back, and they gave it a name that very much so sounds like a fancy bottled water. Anyway, as a woman, for $1,500 or euros, I do expect a lot more than just a few fancy extras, so let's check it out. Design-wise, it definitely is a very nice-looking 34-inch ultra-wide. It combines a white color with some silver-gray elements. It looks pretty elegant with slim side and top bezels, and there is a very minor natural curve present, so it comes across as decent and very professional-looking, which I personally do like. The build quality is quite good. The stand itself is made from metal and it is sturdy with some white plastic covers, but there is a bit of a wobble going on if you touch the panel. Now, this is not completely unusual for an ultra-wide monitor. Some have it more, some have it less, so just make sure you put it on a sturdy desk so it doesn't wobble all the time. The stand is also pretty deep, about 30 centimeters or so make sure that that desk also has enough space for it. It is height adjustable, you can swivel it and you can tilt it, but you cannot rotate it 90 degrees, which makes sense for a monitor of this format. That being said, you can VESA mount it if you want to and position it any way you like. Connection-wise, you get one display port, two HDMI 2.1 ports, a USB hub, and a Type-C port with up to 90 watts of power delivery. So you can use and charge your laptop and use some peripherals using a single cable, which is actually great. Unfortunately, there is not a single cable management option present on the stand, so the cables can be visible from the front. There are two 5-watt speakers built in, which actually sound okay-ish. I wouldn't use them for gaming or for listening to music, for example, but they will be completely fine for that occasional incidental use. The OSD is controlled with a joystick on the back that works perfectly fine, but the Evnia OSD itself isn't very intuitive and it is really hard to get used to navigating it. Definitely something they need to improve on in the future. That being said, the RGB was done pretty well. Just like on Philips Ambilight TVs, the RGB on this monitor changes based on what is going on the screen itself, and with plenty of really bright LEDs, it does add something to the experience. Of course, if you're not into RGB, you can also turn it off completely. It has a pretty standard format for an ultra-wide monitor, and with a DPI of around 110, it offers the same sharpness as a standard 27-inch Quad HD monitor. But let's talk about the panel performance, starting with the brightness. As you would expect from a display with mini LED backlight, it gets very bright. Even in SDR mode, it does 763 nits, which is extreme even for a mini LED backlit monitor. It is not something most people will benefit from, as 700 nits gets a bit too much for a typical room, but it can be very helpful if you're gaming in a super bright environment. In HDR mode, we measured over 1500 nits, which puts it in second place, just behind the ROG PG32UQX and just ahead of the Cooler Master GP27U. And since this is a mini LED and not OLED, it can also maintain that high brightness across the whole panel. So even with a full white image, you're getting well over 1000 nits. In comparison, a typical OLED can do maybe 200-ish nits of full white image, and then only if you're lucky. The minimum white level is 57 nits, which is not the lowest measured, but it is more than dim enough. But when it comes to color performance, this Evnia is pretty disappointing. I've tested lots of Philips monitors in the past, and they generally had really accurate colors out of the box. But in its default setting, the colors here are just all over the place. Some colors are really oversaturated, some are undersaturated, and very few actually look right. Gray tracking looks off too, with most shades being much darker than they should be. And you can see that subjectively too. out of the box, it just doesn't look right, which is really frustrating, as this is something Philips should have seen and fixed before these monitors left the factory. And while this is the first Evnia monitor, it is basically the same brand as Philips and AOC monitors that have been around for a very long time, so I did kind of expect better. There is an sRGB mode built in, but that one is not accurate either. In the Game 1 setting, things do look a bit better. It is still far from perfect, but it's an improvement, and subjectively things do look a lot more natural in this mode. So if you're just playing games, I would say this is the setting to go for. In terms of color range, Evnia does okay. It doesn't have the widest gamut, but it covers the entire sRGB spectrum and 93% of P3. So with manual calibration, you can actually make this an okay option for some photo and video editing. It is just disappointing that it doesn't manage to offer this out of the box, especially when you consider the price tag of this monitor. As a VA panel, it does have good contrast. It is not OLED perfect, but it is a clear upgrade over IPS gaming monitors, especially in HDR mode where local dimming kicks in, and it is even better. It is just a shame they don't allow local dimming in SDR mode, as that could have improved the contrast in SDR mode even more. The uniformity of the panel is good. That's usually something that large VA monitors often do struggle with, so the result is more than fine. And the viewing angles are okay for a VA panel. You can see some color and brightness shifts if you move too much, but it is completely fine for a single user sitting straight behind this monitor. IPS monitors do handle this much better. But let's talk speed. This is a gaming monitor after all, and Evnia is, according to the marketing, a gaming brand. So let's start with some good news. The input lag is quite low. The total latency is similar to some 4K 144Hz monitors like the M32U and the EVE Spectrum, and it is a few milliseconds faster than the Mini LED GP27U. Proper esports monitors are faster, but for a medium speed ultra-wide, this input lag is completely fine. The bad news is that the response times of this monitor are pretty bad. With overdrive off, most transitions take 10 milliseconds or more, with some even around 30 milliseconds. And you can really notice the ghosting when doing anything on the screen, even when just scrolling down websites. Things do improve a little bit on the fast overdrive mode, which is the factory default, but the majority of transitions still take more than 10 milliseconds, with several taking 20 milliseconds or more. Setting overdrive to faster is a very slight improvement over fast, but it is still performing pretty poorly. It is now okay-ish for regular PCUs or some slower content, but the ghosting is still present. When you turn the overdrive to the fastest mode, some transitions are a lot better, but others have just horrible overshoots. So I really don't recommend using this setting at all. Since the first three modes are kind of the same, and then the initial response time jumps up and does get a lot better on the fastest mode, it does feel like they might be able to find a more optimal setting somewhere in between there. Definitely something they should look into and push with a firmware update, because right now you can either choose between three very similar, pretty slow settings, and then one setting that just goes way too far. And honestly, after seeing these response times, I just think that VA panel they use just isn't going to be fast enough, and even with a more optimal setting, it is just never going to be really competitive. It just makes me wonder why they didn't go with a nice and fast color-accurate IPS panel instead, and then use that Mini LED technology to fix the only major IPS downside, which is the contrast. Now they are using the Mini LED to improve the brightness and contrast of a VA panel that already has good contrast, and they're not doing anything about VA's biggest weakness, which is speed. And then, this is actually pretty slow, even for a VA panel. When it comes to power consumption, I measured an average power draw of 43 watts, which isn't bad for a panel of this size, with this type of backlight. Now, peak power consumption in HDR content, with the whole display showing a bit over 1000 nits, is closer to 94 watts, which was expected. So overall, I think Evnia did put a lot of good ideas into this monitor. The design is really nice, and they're going to launch more products that match the overall aesthetic, and everybody likes a nice matching setup. You get all the connections you need, including a Type-C with power delivery. You get a stand that offers good flexibility and a super bright interactive RGB on the back that can really light up your background if you're into that kind of thing. And it can get really bright, which together with local dimming does give some really impressive HDR images, as long as they move slowly, because the response times and ghosting are really big issues in my opinion, and for lots of people that play all kinds of different games, this will be a deal breaker. Especially when you take the price in consideration. They originally planned to release this at around $2,000 or euros, which would be way too much even if it was a super fast monitor. And now they already dropped the price to around $1,500, but in my opinion, even that is too high, where you can get a 34-inch QD OLED for around $1,100. Now, yes, Evnia can go a lot brighter, but the QD OLEDs are way faster, they have better out-of-the-box colors, they have wider color gamut, and they are cheaper. Now, I don't think they can really fix the speed of this panel, but even if they make some improvements to the color accuracy or add a more balanced response time setting without excessive overshoot, it would still be too expensive to compete with the QD OLED alternative. So I really hope they take this advice and drop the price even further. That being said, they are launching their own QD OLED model as well, and I'm really curious to see how that one will do. Anyways, this video was brought to you by Corsair and their Elite LCD XT coolers. These premium all-in-one water coolers combine excellent performance with a fully customizable LCD screen that can showcase anything you have in mind. With a low noise pump and the AF Elite fans, they can easily keep up with the latest and hottest of processors out there while keeping your system quiet. You can install them on a variety of sockets, including the latest Intel and AMD ones, and once the installation is complete, you can use the iCUE software to control the RGB effects or sync them with the rest of your Corsair gear. Check them out using the links in the description below. That is all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do let me know what you think of this Evnia monitor and if you would ever consider it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!